Welcome to the Did You Know podcast, where the focus is on rare diseases, how modern medicine is treating these conditions, including the latest breakthroughs in research, and how people cope with their diagnosis and healing. Your host is Dana Mauro, known for her video series on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook called Did You Know Ataxia Facts? 300 videos have been produced and seen in 17 countries to date. And now, your host, Dana Mauro.
Hi, No Ataxia Nation. I'm here at the 62nd Annual Ataxia Conference in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I'm very excited to introduce Gil L'Italien. Is that how you say it?
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Melissa Beiner. They're both from Biohaven Pharmaceuticals, and I invited them here to tell you some exciting news that's going on in the pharmaceutical industry with Biohaven. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you
for joining me.
Thanks for having us. It's fun to be back here again.
It's fun to be back, right? And it's good to be here. She's a veteran and you're new, but we're welcoming you with open arms. We're glad that you could join us today. So I understand that there's some movement happening at Biohaven with these pharmaceutical trials, two in particular, and I was hoping that you could both speak about that.
Sure. That would be great. So we spoke a little bit at our last podcast about our first study of our study drug troriluzole in patients with SCA.
Yep.
And that study was a short-term study that we did, and it was actually the first registrational trial of a drug in SCA patients in this country ever. So Biohaven sort of pioneered that study.
Which is fabulous.
Which was fantastic, yes. And when we designed the study, we had an 8-week phase where we had patients on drug and placebo, and then we opened it up for a year for patients to all be on troriluzole. So initially, we didn't hit our end mark at the end of our randomization phase to show that the drug had benefit over placebo. But what we realized when we looked back through the data was really that what happened was our study design was a little bit too short-term for this patient population. And looking at the natural history studies, we realized that the way patients evolve over the course of a year, the way their disease progresses, we really do need to look at it for a longer term. So we are now starting up another study with troriluzole in SCA patients that will last for an entire year. And we've already screened 7 patients for the study. We started it up this month. There's going to be about 230 patients enrolled in the study. Okay. All the information about it is on the clinicaltrials.gov website. And we'll have about 22 sites across the country, everywhere from New York, Florida, California. There's a site pretty much touching every corner of the state.
Now, if somebody is hearing this and they want to get involved in that particular study, what would be their next steps? What would they do? Bring this information to their neurologist and ask to be involved, or how would they get involved?
Yeah, so I think that the great thing would be for them to look on the clinicaltrials.gov site.
Okay.
Look up our trial. It's a clinical trial of troriluzole in SCA patients. And we have some of our inclusion criteria there. So the study's going to include patients with SCA types 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, and 10.
Okay.
And the sites, as they get up and running, will be listed on the website as well, that they can bring that information to their doctor, and their doctor can put them in contact with a site. There's also a way to contact us at Biohaven. So we receive actually emails from patients across the country all the time saying, for example, I live in Boston, and where would I find more information about this study to see if I meet eligibility criteria? And then we can send them information for, say, Dr. Jeremy Schmaman, who was our first site up and running, who's already screened the 7 patients. We can say, look, this site is the closest to you. It's right in Boston.
Okay, that's great. So you can direct them to the exact site that they need to go to.
Yes, exactly.
Something that you mentioned that I want to just touch on for a minute is you mentioned the natural history study and how you had gathered data from that. And by that data, you realized that your study was too short. And so one of the things that is important is that people be involved in these natural history studies. And this is a perfect example of why it's so important.
Yes, it is so important because when we design clinical trials, we really have to have a deep understanding of the natural history of the disease. In other words, how patients' symptoms progress over time and how they differ between the different subtypes within a certain disorder. So that really informs clinical trials, and it was really helpful to us because moving forward with this trial, when we got to the end of our total study, we had a lot of doctors across the country who were involved in our study calling us and saying, listen, our patients are coming off this medication and they feel like they're progressing now. Is there any way we can extend this? And it's not an FDA-approved medication. That's pretty tricky to do. What we did was we extended for another year with that patient population, but we decided we need to look into it a little more deeply.
Yep.
And we have natural history data from the first U.S. study that was done over the course of a year, and that kind of led us to the idea that in general, and there's been some studies in Europe too to confirm this, on a certain scale that doctors use to rate ataxia called the SARA, the scale for the assessment and rating of ataxia, on average, patients progress about a point being a little worsening of their disorder over the
Okay.
course of a year naturally. We were able to kind of take that data, and even though it was an official control arm to our study, because they weren't matched perfectly, obviously, we matched them as well as we could statistically. I'll let Gil speak to that a little more. And we really found that what that data showed, it gave us very encouraging results to see that really these patients may potentially have had slowing of the progression of their disorder, because the patients in our study had a little bit of an improvement on the SARA as opposed to that 1-point decline, and I'll let Gil speak to that.
So we had two pieces of information that were helpful. We had this extension data, this 48 weeks of patients being treated with troriluzole, and we also had, as Melissa mentions, the natural history data from the U.S. Data from Dr. Ajizawa, and that gave us the opportunity, as Melissa said, to really look at, compare what's going on with the patients that are being followed in this extension study that are being treated to patients who are not treated. That's the natural history, the natural decline of the disease. It's kind of apples and oranges until you put together some of the statistics, until you do it the right way.
Yep.
And the way I can best say it is we pulled patients from the natural history population with Dr. Ajizawa's study that were similar to the patients in our trial. So it's kind of making them equal to each other, so that the changes that you see in one, and you can compare to the changes that you see in the other. And if you see a difference, it might have something to do with the treatment. And so what was really exciting about that work was, as Melissa mentioned, a lot of these patients, they weren't getting necessarily better, they weren't getting worse, they were stable basically in their disease, but when you look at the natural history data, they were getting worse, they were declining. So you compare the two statistically and you get a pretty big difference between the two. So that was very exciting for us because it gave us optimism around the design of the new study, the enhanced study, which Melissa will talk about further. And it also suggested that the difference that we were going to see with treatment could be, something that is meaningful to patients and also meaningful to the regulatory bodies like the FDA. So Melissa presented some of that data today. The goal right now is to really disseminate that information, let the neurological community, become aware of it, and also just leverage those lessons learned to help inform the design of this study. The other good piece of this, and it's a good component for I was talking to Rob about this earlier, Rob Berman, who's our Chief Medical Officer. When patients enroll in a study, there's a hope of benefiting from the treatment, but they also want to contribute to the science, to the knowledge base. And so what the really good thing that we're doing with this long-term study is that information is being used to help better design the second study. And it's also information that's going to be useful to practitioners, to clinicians, because we can look at, as Melissa mentioned, SCA genotypes, et cetera. So it's kind of a win-win. So when patients agree to enroll in these types of studies, they can help themselves, but they can also help their fellow patients, which I think is phenomenal.
No, it is. It's really fabulous. Now, do you get any, do you ever tap the CORDS registry for any participants, or do you normally just have people contact you, or either via directly or via their neurologist?
We are being contacted now by patients through the CORDS registry.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's
so it's
another
increasing
important
awareness. Yeah.
It's another important thing
really
to be involved
fantastic.
in if you want to participate in this as a patient. It's just getting on a natural history study and also being part of CORD's registry.
Yep.
Yeah.
And for patients out there with SCA, you've seen this, Dana, right, at this conference now, compared to where we were 2 years ago. Biohaven feels incredibly proud to be a part of the fact that we did do the first registrational trial in SCA in this country. And look at how the last 2 years have unfolded.
Yep.
We now have so many studies out for biomarkers, imaging studies to track the course of the disease. We have more awareness within the community than we've ever had, I think, right?
Right.
We have more awareness about who to contact with ataxia specialists across the country. It's a really exploding field right now, and I think patients should be really excited about that because there's all this attention now to the patient voice and helping get patient-focused drug development groups going so that patients and advocacy groups can actually have a say in the drug development process. Patients tell us, this is what the most meaningful change that we have in our disease is. This is the symptom that's the most bothersome. This is the thing that interferes the most with how I interact in my daily life. All of that information we can hone in on and gather, and we can incorporate that into endpoints that we use or assessments that we use to measure the benefit of a treatment.
Right, because if you don't, you need people to tell you those things.
Yes.
Otherwise, they're not known. So
Well, the FDA, that's been, as Melissa said, the voice of the patient has been important, but you have to be able to find a way to take that voice and put it into something scientific, really, that can be measured. And that's what we've attempted to do. We've really listened to what's important to patients. It's called, really concepts that are relevant to patients. And we've listened to what the FDA has said, the regulator has said, and come up with a design and a change to the SARA that really addresses that need.
Yeah.
And so it's really trying to make it more what we call functional, really what patients can do on a daily basis. So we're excited about that, and we think that's a contribution even beyond this specific trial to perhaps other trials that other companies could do.
Right.
Yep.
Because that data is vital, it's critical, and it doesn't go away. You
Right.
collect it and you just keep adding to it. So it's going to show themes or, lead you somewhere down the line, right? And you just need to get a certain amount of it in order to start seeing things. Just like you need to have the trial go on for a certain period of time to start seeing differences.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And these studies and these patient-focused drug development groups, as soon as one thing happens, it's a catalyst for another. So we had that small patient-focused group that came out of one of our last NAF meetings, and now Dr. Schmaumann at Mass General, which I know we've talked a lot about this even at our last podcast, he's doing his PROM Ataxia, which is a
Right.
patient-reported outcome measure that Gil and I are doing a collaborative validation on with him at MGH, and that's a scale that really holds the voice of the patient and what's
does.
important to them in their disorder. Yeah.
Yep,
It
we're
does,
looking
yeah.
at his scale, we're looking at a number of other scales like the SARA, like FARS is another one that also measures patients' function, patients' activities of daily living. We're comparing the two in a scientific way to see if we can make them better, more valid.
Yep.
And, the other piece of this too is, you've heard a lot of talk about biomarkers and genetics, and this information will help the companies that are developing those drugs as well, because they have to do something called translational medicine. You've got a change in a biomarker, like a protein goes down or a protein goes up with treatment, and you can measure that. But what does it mean, again, in terms of patient function, in terms of what's the benefit to patients? And the work that we're doing, we feel, can help to make that link as well. So
Yeah.
it has applications beyond. Yep.
No, that's fabulous because I think a lot of times when you're a patient, you're participating in a study, you only see that one aspect of it. You
Right.
don't realize how that feeds into the bigger picture,
Right.
right? And so I think that the more we can make the patient community aware of that bigger picture and how all of these things connect, it's really just, it'll be vital to getting their participation in a lot of this stuff, because they have blinders on right now, and it's not their fault. It's just they're not aware of all this other stuff that's going
Right.
on.
And I got to add one other thing for me. Melissa's an MD. She's treated patients. I'm a PhD, so I haven't had as much patient contact. But some of when we went to visit Jeremy and he was evaluating patients, I got to talk to people. And one gentleman, he said what he do. Dr. Schmaumann asked him what he does, and he says, "I volunteer in a homeless shelter." and another lady was helping to train some of the assist dogs, the Great Danes, to help people to stand.
Yeah.
And so it was really inspiring for me to see people, that are having a tough time but still are willing to give back and are just showing their humanity. There was a third lady who said she babysits for her grandkids, 2 and 4 years old, and I said to her, I do that sometimes. And man, it's a tough job, and so I really admire you for that.
Yeah, and we don't know what it
inspiring.
is about this set of disorders, so we talk about it all the time, and I know you see this too, but it's just they're such a stoic,
Yep.
spirited, charismatic group of people that what came first? I don't know. Right? Did the disorder bring it out in them, or
Right.
is there something about this disorder?
Right.
It's an amazing group of people, and we see that all the time.
Well, and-
Even just hearing this speech yesterday from the young girl Cameron, which
Cameron.
was so beautiful. What an
Actu-
extraordinary woman.
Yes, she
Yeah.
is. She really is. I had the opportunity to speak to her last night, and I actually invited her to do a podcast with us.
Oh, that's great.
That's great.
Because we want to get her message out, because
Yeah.
she is extraordinary. And she actually is 19, and she's in college. And I said to her, are you physically going to college, or are you virtually going to college? And she said, no, I'm physically going. And I said, good for you. I said, you keep at that, and you have an opportunity to touch so many people and educate them just by being at school. Because
Right.
people are going to be curious about what's going on, and you can share and make a difference in that way.
Yeah, and that's why these podcasts are so important too, because I think increasing awareness overall, a lot of people don't know what ataxia is. Right? And they don't know that ataxia is a really broad umbrella for a lot of different disorders.
Right, and I think the other thing that they don't realize, which you guys have brought a little bit of light to today, is the fact that, I have SCA1, so I'm primarily going to focus on everything to do with SCA1. What I don't understand, and the message I would like to get out, is that someone can let me say it this way, what's being done for SCA1 can benefit someone with another type of SCA down the road, and
Absolutely.
to just understand that that is possible because they are related.
Yes.
Yeah, the way I look at it in some ways as an epidemiologist is, really it's the rate of disease progression can vary based on the genotype, but it's still at base is kind of the same disease. So,
Yeah.
Yep.
We just interviewed Kyle Bryant prior to having you guys on, and he has FA.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about FA being it primarily is resulting from the mitochondria, and it's an energy deficient disease, which so is ataxia.
Yeah.
So, he has a form of ataxia, but what he's experiencing is evident in the other forms of ataxia as well, but we just name them differently.
So what's cool about that is in our study, and we've been working with Dr. Subramani, one of the secondary endpoint is the Frederick's Ataxia Rating Scale, the functional part and the activities of daily living. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
There's lessons learned there, and
Absolutely.
we're using that instrument to learn more about SCA patients.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of a win-win.
It is,
Yeah.
and the more you know, the more you realize some of those connected pieces, right?
Yeah.
So that's my goal, is trying to just share that information with the general ataxia public so that they can start seeing that everything that's being worked on has a benefit for everyone. It just may not be immediately.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's an exciting time for this field.
Yes.
It really is.
It's like I feel like we're on the cutting edge with some of this stuff.
Sure, and
Yeah.
We are.
Meeting patients, I think, it's incredibly motivational for us.
Yep.
We drive each other to get this stuff done, and
Yep.
it's been really a good collaboration for us. And also, our other colleagues at Biohaven are working extremely hard
Yep.
to find a solution. So it's inspiring, absolutely.
Yeah. I have the utmost respect for you guys, because it's like, you're just drilling and drilling and drilling, trying to find something that works. And it's awesome, because I think that the layperson might not understand that. It's not just about science, it's about helping people.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
There was he was a physicist, Dr. Feynman, who said, nature does not give up her secrets easily. And that's why it takes a lot of work
Yeah.
to really increase our knowledge and find out about treatments that can benefit patients. So
I like that.
It's hard work. Yep.
It is, and we've seen too that just because you have a negative trial doesn't mean you have a failed trial.
Great deal.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a lesson learned.
Absolutely. And every little advance that you make opens up a number of avenues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's fabulous. I'm so happy that you guys were able to spend some time with me today and talk
Thank
about
you.
these things.
Anytime.
It's
Our pleasure.
exciting. Is there anything before we leave our talk today, is there anything that you want to express to maybe our audience members that are watching today?
Just that these patients really are, patients with ataxia are a huge inspiration to us. And we remember every step of the way that they are the reason that we're here.
Yeah.
And that every time they participate in the natural history studies, in patient-focused drug development, in clinical trials, every little step gets us one step closer to understanding more and more about the disease and to advancing the cause for ataxia patients overall. And they really are an inspiration to us.
That's nice to hear.
And I would just add to that similarly to say to the patients, we have the utmost respect and admiration for what you're going through. And, we're dedicated to try to do something to make things better. But the way you lead your lives, the way you really deal with this condition is, it's a powerful example for all of us. So we're just happy to have this opportunity to help.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're fighters.
Absolutely. And as you know, Dana, I just recently lost a very, very close friend to multiple system atrophy.
I know. I'm so sorry to hear that.
The most courageous, incredible man I know. And I'm really happy to say that Biohaven has in our pipeline coming up very shortly a clinical trial in multiple system atrophy.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we'll have to talk
and
about
you
that.
have a personal tie to that.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
Very close tie to that.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you back on so that you can tell us more about that study.
Great.
I thought it was nice. Melissa paid a tribute to her friend at the end of her presentation this morning, so that was quite moving.
Nice. Yeah. No, it's interesting how people that you meet just make that lasting impression on you. Not everyone, but there are those individuals in life that just make a lasting impression. So
Absolutely.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Gil. It was really nice to meet you. I'll have to have you on again.
Absolutely.
And Melissa, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the podcast today. We hope that you learned a little bit more about clinical trials and what the work that Biohaven is doing. And we hope you also realize the importance of participating in a natural history study or being part of the registry at CORDS. And so until next time, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again.
Thank you for listening in to the Did You Know podcast with your host, Dana Mauro. Please subscribe to this channel to hear all of the latest podcasts. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable information and inspires you to advocate for yourself and educate everyone in your circle. Remember, you are the expert and best spokesperson for your rare disease. Thank you.